Were language not indisputably the highest art that we have, then I should place music still higher than language. It's clear that Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, Prince of Poets and Germany's pride and joy, loved music. He thought music synonymous with pleasurable emotions, that music was a kind of cure. Though he claimed himself multiple times to be unmusical, Goethe was quite alone in his feelings. A multitude of composers have found vast inspiration in his poetry, including Charles Gounod, Berlioz, Brahms, and Beethoven. In particular, they were entranced by Goethe's character Mignon from Wilhelm Meister's Apprenticeship, a story about a young man who, after being disillusioned by his love, sets out to travel and learns that life in itself is an apprenticeship. One of the events in the book is when Wilhelm meets a mysterious waif of a child whose only pronounced dialogue in the novel is in musical verse. Accompanied by a zither, she sings 4 songs that give insight into the dark, tragic past and emotional turmoil she struggles to endure with only the hope of heaven to provide her solace. I'm Kathryn Linzmaier, here to explore the complex psychology of Mignon through my chosen versions of her 4 songs I believe to exemplify Goethe's text most faithfully. The first song, and most often put to music, is Kennst du das Land? The singer of this poem, Mignon, fascinated and intrigued the main character Wilhelm. Though no older than 13, Mignon exuded an air beyond her years. She was self-contained and graceful, yet still had an awkwardness about her. At first, Wilhelm hadn't been able to tell if she was a girl or boy. She would never walk up or down the stairs, but run, and he had caught her sitting on top of a wardrobe, having climbed it only to meditate. There was so much she seemed to withhold, yet if she did speak, it was a strange mixture of French, Italian, and German. Who was this young girl enslaved as an acrobat for a traveling circus? When Kennst du das Land is sung in the novel, Wilhelm has paid Mignon's captors for her freedom. She had been a loyal companion to him and clearly admired him for the kindness he showed her. With exemplary musicianship, Mignon tells Wilhelm in Kennst du das Land of her homeland, where lemon trees bloom, the soft winds rustle the myrtle and laurel leaves, and marble statues stand erect. With pleas to Wilhelm, her protector, she begs him to return her there. This loving description of Italy, depicted in the text, can be traced back to Goethe's own pilgrimage through its wonders as he sought inspiration. Franz Liszt, composer of a much lesser-known version of Kennst du das Land, took the same journey of self-enlightenment. In 1842, the year Liszt composed his setting of Kennst du das Land, he was in the midst of touring, a time when Listomania was rampant across Europe. Much of the inspiration for his interpretation seems to have come from his time spent living with married Countess Marie de Flavigny in Italy. In a letter to a very good friend, George Sand, he proclaimed, "Italy, Italy, you will always be the chosen fatherland of all those who are brotherless. Italy's homesickness is homesickness of a noble spirit, and they will shout out along with Goethe's mysterious child, Dahin, Dahin." Liszt seemed to pay heed to Mignon's words, and the result was a version of Kennst du das Land that evoked the description of the song she sings in the novel. She intoned each verse with a certain solemn grandeur. The words Kennst du es wohl were given weightiness and mystery. The Dahin, Dahin was suffused with longing, and she modified the phrase lasst scheinen each time it was repeated, so that one time it was entreating and urging, the next time pressing and full of promise. Later on in the story, Wilhelm sinks into a depression that Mignon, her protector, only known as the harper, tried to assuage with a duet, Nur wer die Sehnsucht kennt, to let him know he is not alone in his suffering. A composer who was able to relate to such indescribable depression, and even wrote multiple variations of the song, was whom Franz Liszt called the most poetic of all musicians. Franz Schubert immersed himself in Goethe's poetry between 1814 and 1816, composing 30 songs from Goethe's poems in 1 year. In 1823, at age 26, he began showing signs of syphilis, the illness that eventually killed him. Over these next 5 years before his death, he composed some of his most famous lieder, including the 6th and final setting of Nur wer die Sehnsucht kennt. In Wilhelm Meister's Apprenticeship, Mignon and the harper sing it to comfort Wilhelm's depression, but it shows even more of a sense of longing for what Mignon's lost, her homeland and family. Wilhelm describes Nur wer die Sehnsucht kennt as having passionate expressiveness, and was like an echo of what he himself was feeling. Based on the amount of times the song was arranged, Schubert must have felt like Wilhelm, especially in March of 1824. He sent Goethe a letter describing himself as the unhappiest, the most miserable person in the world. The next summer, Schubert prepared 3 settings of Goethe's poems on paper with gold borders, along with a letter that read, "Your Excellency, if I should succeed in showing my unbounded respect through these compositions of your poems, and perhaps gain some recognition for my unworthy person, then I should count the favorable outcome of this wish as the happiest event of my life." Unfortunately, Goethe never gave him replies to any of the letters Schubert sent him, and so the young composer never knew that Goethe indeed admired his work when he heard Schubert's Lieder sung. Schubert's successor as a composer of Lieder, Robert Schumann, took up the mantle in trying to put the elusive Mignon to music. Schumann was taken with the character of Mignon. He found not only her childlike innocence alluring, but found her sorrowful existence moving. Raised by a bookseller and publisher, Schumann had a very strong literary background. He had dived into Goethe's works early on and was easily enraptured by them. In 1844, he read Wilhelm Meister's Apprenticeship not only once, but 3 times. In this part of the narrative, Wilhelm has asked Mignon to speak about what happened to her prior to their introductions, but she remains steady as a rock in her refusal to talk. After he leaves, she sings of what she wishes she could disclose specifically about her past. She longs and hopes for when she can be free from the pain of what she has had to endure. Composed in 1849, Mignon's third song, Heiss, mich, nicht, reden, has been described as a passionate outburst of great power. Schumann was able to elaborate more on Schubert's style of writing for the poetry and its meaning with virtuosic accompaniment underneath. The change in emotion and mood that Schumann is able to depict in the voice and piano shines through with clarity, and it was this continuation and hope for reinvention that encouraged Hugo Wolf to do the character of Mignon justice. In 1888, during a great burst of creativity, Wolf began composing music for the Wilhelm Meister poems, because he sensed that no one before him had succeeded in producing settings for them correctly. Despite his research into the novel and its characters, some critics believe his settings are not as true as Wolf initially intended, but I have a different opinion. The final song Mignon sings, "So lasst, mich, scheinen," cannot be fully understood outside the context of the novel. At this point in the story, Mignon dresses up as an angel for a play, and afterwards is told she must take it off. She refuses, and tells them to allow her to appear as an angel until she becomes one. Mignon foreshadows her own death that later occurs, and she shows a strong affinity for the peace that death will bring her. She even uses irony in her lyrics. Wolf brings out the depth and maturity of her character that hasn't been shown to this much extent prior to this song, yet he was able to maintain the sense of innocence and naivete she represents. Though from different eras of the Romantic period, these 4 composers, Liszt, Schubert, Schumann, and Wolf, took a fascinating character and gave her a unique, alluring voice in the world of vocal literature. Despite their distinctive points of view, I believe each of their contributions bring out a side of the tortured Mignon that are more effective together than apart, and that her creator Goethe would admire and be proud of.